All right, old school NBA fans, self-researched NBA facts. I got another video for you. As always, thanks to anybody who watches my videos, subscribes to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Still a young channel. Just trying to get this thing going. It's been growing a little bit lately, and I really appreciate it. Welcome to all the new people. It's a channel that tries to stay with provable facts, no wild takes, no ridiculous junk coming out, and debunking a lot of narratives. That's my favorite thing to do. One narrative that I wanted to debunk was that the Bulls' competition wasn't really that good. And everybody always wants to point to, like how a single player ranked historically. One narrative I always hear is that, beating the Jazz in 97, 98, or, even Seattle in 96, even though those teams won 62 to 64 games each, somehow diminishes them if they would have beaten, say, like San Antonio in 98, if they would have busted through, if they would have beat Utah, and then Jordan would have beat Duncan and Robinson on his resume. Or if Olajuwon would have got through in 97, if John Stockton doesn't hit that three-pointer and the Rockets pull it out in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, somehow that's going to enhance his resume because of beating single players. Well, those teams like Seattle, like Utah, were very, very good. And they beat people. What do you want me to say? They beat them. The Jazz in 98 were on a roll. They beat the Rockets the last two games of their series in the first round. They beat San Antonio 4 out of 5. That was Duncan and Robinson. And then they swept Kobe and Shaq. It was a young Kobe, but an all-star Kobe. Okay? They beat those guys 10 out of 11 games. And if you count game 1 of the finals, that's 11 out of 12. They won against that level of historically great players. Since everybody always thinks it's all about single individual players, well, they beat 11 out of 12 out of those players. I mean, that's insane. Nobody's ever been able to explain to me how then did all these goofy white guys like Greg Ostertag, Jeff Hornacek, John Stockton, how did they put it on those teams? Not just beat them, smashed them, all of them. What do you want me to say? And if it wasn't for Stockton rimming out that shot in Game 6 of the Finals in '98, I think the Jazz win that series with a banged up Pippen. Game 7 in Utah, I really believe that. I mean, maybe Jordan could have pulled it out. I wouldn't put anything past him, but I don't know, man. It didn't look good. But anyway, this competition thing to me is just ridiculous. It just is. I'm going to pull out two examples. One of them is going to be the Lakers in the 80s. Let's just take a look. Okay, so the Lakers in 1980, they actually did play a couple good teams. Like Phoenix was 55-27, and then they beat Seattle, who was 56-26. They were good teams. Then they beat Philly in the finals, who was 59-23. Now, are we saying that the Philadelphia 76ers of 1980 in the finals were better than, say, like Phoenix of 93? How can you definitively say that? You know what I mean? Why? Philly was always sniffing around the finals, whatever, but they could never break through until Moses got there, and that was a one-year wonder. And then the Lakers played Houston in 81, who was a 40-42 team. Moses was on that team, sure, but they were under 500. And the Lakers had they had Norm Nixon 21st for MVP, Michael Cooper 24th for MVP, second all defense, Jamal Wilkes an all-star 10th for MVP, Magic was 11th for MVP, Kareem was 3rd for MVP, first team all-NBA and first team all-defense. You had 5 of the top 24 players in MVP on the Lakers in 81. 5 of the top 24 on one team. And they got beat in the first round by a 40-42 team. So I don't know where all this competition junk is coming from, but the Lakers got beat by a much inferior team. Don't hate on the Bulls just because they never lost to an inferior team. Okay, so in 83, they got beat by Philly, who was a juggernaut, no doubt about it. 65-17, they had a ridiculously good team, no question. So in 84, they lost to Boston. Now, Boston was the first net team, all that. They lost in 7 narrowly, okay? And then in 85, they beat Boston. But in 86, they got beat by Houston, a 51-31 team. Again, they got Michael Cooper, James Worthy, Kareem, and Magic. Kareem and Magic both finished top 5 for MVP. They were first offensively, 7th defensively, the third net team. And they lost. They got beat in 5 to Houston. So again, another team they probably shouldn't have lost to. Other than the finals, the Lakers really didn't play that strong of teams. I mean, in 87 they beat Boston, who was definitely on the downslope. They narrowly escaped Detroit in 7 games in the East Finals. And then they did win. In 89, they got totally decimated, got swept. I know they had injuries and all that. Okay, fine. Well, in 1990, the Lakers were 63-19, the best record in the NBA. They had Worthy, they had Cooper. He wasn't playing as much. He was his last season. They had Vlade Divac, Hall of Famer, right? And they had Magic, the MVP. So they technically had 4 Hall of Famers on that team. They lost to a 54-28 Phoenix team who had no Hall of Famers. Now, to me, it was a loss they shouldn't have incurred in 5 games. But they had Tom Chambers, who was second-team All-NBA, 8th in MVP. Kevin Johnson, who was second-team All-NBA. You had Dan Marley, Jeff Hornacek, Kurt Rambis, used to be a Laker, and Eddie Johnson, a very serviceable role player. So to me, it's you got beat, but it was to a good team. But the competition wasn't that insane for the Lakers. It just wasn't. I mean, they played Boston 3 times, and they played the Pistons twice. And they played Philly in 83 when they were really, really good. But the other 2 Philly teams were no better than like the 97 Heat, the 96 Magic, the 93 Knicks, the 92 Trailblazers, the 93 Suns. They just were no better than. So, to me, that's just a ridiculously silly argument about how they didn't play anybody. When you compare it to these other people that didn't get beat by anybody, they didn't beat them. The Bulls didn't give up losses like that. Only in 95, when Jordan came back for the quarter of a season, they didn't even have a power forward on the roster, really. I think it was like Dickie Simpkins. That was the only loss they incurred from 91 to 98 with Jordan on the team. Now, here's another one. San Antonio. Now, San Antonio in the early, they got beat by Utah in 98, a really good team. They won the championship, and then they lost to the Lakers a couple times. I think Duncan got hurt in 2000. 01 and 02, the Lakers were just the better team. They just were. Then San Antonio beat the Lakers in 03 because the Lakers were starting to go down, down, down. And in 04, San Antonio got beat by the Lakers, which turns out that was an upset. They should have beat them. San Antonio was the number 1 defense, number 1 net. But beyond that, you look at some of these teams, like in 05, I don't know. I don't really see anything that crazy. 2006, they were the number 1 defense, number 1 net team. They won 63 games. They lost to a 60-win Dallas team that had 1 Hall of Famer. Everyone makes such a big deal about it. So a 60-win team with 1 Hall of Famer, Dallas, beats San Antonio, but nobody ever wants to beat up on Duncan, right? Never. Jordan never lost to these teams. He always beat those teams like Portland, like Phoenix, like the Knicks, the ones you always try to talk about that only had 1 Hall of Famer. 1 Hall of Famer. Well, Duncan got beat by a 1 Hall of Famer team in 2006, Dallas, right? Okay. How about 2009? Same thing. They got beat by Dallas. They were a 50-win team. San Antonio was a 54-win team. Dirk Nowitzki was 10th for MVP. It wasn't even like he was like runner-up for MVP, like Barkley or Malone was, or one of those guys, or Magic in 91. No, he was 10th for MVP. They got beat. And Duncan had, and like, for example, in 2009, Tony Parker was 8th for MVP, 3rd team All-NBA. Tim Duncan was 11th for MVP, 11th Defensive Player of the Year. Second had Manu Ginobili, an extra Hall of Famer. 3 Hall of Famers on that team, right? I mean, it's just silly stuff. In 2010, San Antonio got beat by Phoenix, a 54 in 2018. It wasn't an upset because San Antonio only won 50 games, but they only had one Hall of Famer, Steve Nash. So Duncan again got beat by a 1 Hall of Fame team. How about in 2011 when San Antonio was 61 and 21? Okay, they were the second offense and 4th net rated team in the league. Tony Parker 12th for MVP, Ginobili 8th for MVP, 3rd team All NBA. Duncan was an All-Star that year. They lost to a 46 and 36 Memphis team that had no Hall of Famers at all. They had Zach Randolph was 3rd team All-NBA and Tony Allen was 2nd team All-Defense, but that's it. They didn't have anything as far as Hall of Famers go. That's a 15-win differential. Why are we hating on Jordan? Because he didn't take these kind of upsets like Magic did or like Duncan did. You know, you're looking at it all wrong. Talking about level of competition. He didn't play a team like the Celtics in 85 or, the 76ers in 83. No, he did not play them. However, when you flip it on the other side of the coin, he also didn't get beat by these teams. You know what I'm saying? In 2012, San Antonio 50 and 16 in the strike-shortened year. They were 1st offensively and 2nd net rated team. Tim Duncan 5th in MVP, 2nd team All NBA. Tony Parker 5th for MVP, 2nd team All NBA. Duncan was 14th for MVP. Kawhi Leonard just got drafted, a top 75 player on your team now. Ginobili's on your team. You got 4 Hall of Famers, and you get beat by OKC when you're up 2-0. You're up 2-0, and you lose to Oklahoma City. It was 47 and 19. You had a 3-win differential. Michael Jordan never lost, other than the 95, against Orlando, when he had a player that made all league, either all defense or all NBA, either one. Never lost, with the exception of 95, where he was only there for a quarter of the season. That's it. That's the one exception. That's all there is to talk about. This whole, Michael Jordan didn't play anybody anything. It's just a ridiculous argument, but you never want to talk about the fact that he never got upset. That's the thing you don't ever want to talk about. And I'm going to have another video coming out tomorrow that's going to get into a lot more detail about that. But Michael Jordan did play some good teams. Did he play the 01 Lakers or the 83 76ers? No. But how can you fault him for that? But also just beat everybody in their path with no exceptions. Nobody else can say that. Duncan can't say it. He got beat by a 46-win, no Hall of Famer Memphis team in 2011. No big deal, right? 2010, one Hall of Fame Phoenix 54-win team. Or how about a 2006 Dallas team with 1 Hall of Famer, a 2009 Dallas team with 1 Hall of Famer? This stuff can get real stupid real fast. So I think that the things you try to hold against Jordan is just anything you can try to grab onto is what it is. And the fact is, there were more 60-win teams in the 90s than there was any other decade. Now, am I saying that it was the best teams? No, but you got to remember, the scheduling was also done a lot differently back in the 80s. So you had to play teams a certain amount of times and all that kind of thing. There would have been teams with better records if they would have had, more teams spread out in the league. You would have been playing teams a little tougher. And the Lakers benefited a lot, specifically because the West was pretty weak, and they got to just play these teams 5 and 6 times each. Dallas and the Clippers and Phoenix, they just weren't very good in those mid-'80s. Those teams just weren't good. You know what I'm saying? There's so many of those teams like Golden State. They just weren't good teams. In the very early beginning of the 80s, there were a couple good teams in the West. And then in the very late 80s into the early 90s, the West started getting much better. But in that mid-'80s period, it was junk. It really was. And all the Lakers had to do was just beat whoever was in the finals. And they basically split. They were 5-4 in the finals. So to me, and they were absolutely loaded. Way better supporting cast than Michael Jordan had. You know what I mean? James Worthy. You had players like Norm Nixon, Jamal Wilkes, Bob McAdoo, an MVP, 2-time scoring title, maybe even 3-time. 2 or 3 times he won that scoring title, won an MVP, coming off the bench, giving you, quality minutes, averaging like 15 points a game. Norm Nixon was on a trajectory to be a Hall of Famer. Michael Cooper is in the Hall of Fame, mostly because of defense. James Worthy, top 75 player. I mean, listen to all these players. And then, of course, Kareem. He had an unbelievable team, and yet still they got upset. They got beat with a better supporting cast against worse teams than Jordan. Well, Jordan didn't get beat by anybody, but I'm just saying worse teams than Jordan got beat by. You take like 89, for example. Well, the Lakers got swept by Detroit, and they won 57 games. The Bulls in 89 won 47 games, and they beat Detroit twice. And I know Magic got hurt, but they were already down 0-2 before he got injured. And I know Byron Scott was injured and all that, but they weren't going to beat Detroit that year anyway. And the Lakers in 89 were undefeated in the playoffs. They were 11-0 going into those finals. So I'm just saying, a lot of it had to do with the schedule. Had a lot to do with it back then, too. Like the Bulls, if they'd been in the West in 89, they probably would have won like 55 games. That's just how crazy it was, how much better the East was than the West. But anyway, that's all I got for this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time.